I'm here with Professor Emeritus Paul Axelrod, the author of Scholars and Dollars, Politics, Economics, and the Universities of Ontario 1945 to 1980, published in 1982 by University of Toronto Press. Let's dive right into this book, which was largely adapted from your PhD thesis, Paul. Is that correct?
Yes, it was. I added a chapter for the book.
Well, reading from page 79, a chapter about university funding in Ontario immediately after World War II, the fact that the Premier of Ontario was often also the Minister of Education is a sign of how important that portfolio used to be. Why can't we go back to those days, Paul?
Well, it certainly was the case. Education followed by higher education were major social priorities, especially in the 1960s. And a lot of that was a demographic phenomenon. I mean, you had the baby boom bubble born after World War II. They needed to go to school. You had to build way more schools at the elementary, secondary level, and then at the post-secondary level. But it went beyond that because the goal was to increase the participation rates of students in post-secondary education, and huge resources in the province went to that. John Robarts had been the Minister of Education, who was instrumental in building much of the system. He became Premier. He was followed by William Davis in education, and Davis became Premier. By contrast, in the 1970s, there were several ministers in a short period of time in colleges and universities, and that was a more difficult time for the universities. There were financial issues, the bloom was off the rose a little bit, challenging economic circumstances, but it was a very high social and funding priority. It remains so, really, because education and health are still the two largest components of the provincial budget.
Anything in this book serve as a cautionary tale for those working in public policy for educational funding?
It's interesting, during the expansion period up to the 1970s, universities were expected to grow, to be more open, to serve broadly social and economic expectations. But the government really didn't have a master plan. They mostly allowed universities to plan new programs. They said, okay, here's the number we want. You figure out how to do it. You figure out what to teach them. And the money basically followed the students. Where they were highly enrolled, the universities got more money for those students. And, it's still largely the way the system is run, but there's today a lot more direction and intervention from the government in trying to foresee the future in terms of what programs will matter, where the jobs are expected to be. And as it turns out, the government isn't very good at that, at making those kinds of predictions. I think in a sense, the students are better at that. They'll tell you what they want to study, and the money still should follow the students, because there've been a couple of major stumbles in terms of this overarching planning in which the government engaged. So I guess a warning to government officials who think the system can be finely tuned from the top down. It really can't be. Let the money follow the students. Let them tell you what they want to study, and you'll end up probably supporting the things that are valuable.
The book is called Scholars and Dollars, Politics, Economics, and the Universities of Ontario, 1945 to 1980, available on the Canadian Electronic Library. Paul Axelrod, thank you for joining me.
Thank you.